Welcome to the Catalyst Life Coaching Podcast with John Kim and Noelle Cordeaux. If you're inspired to begin your own life coaching practice or just want to learn a little bit more about what it's all about, visit JRNI.co. That's JRNI.co for more information. Your adventure awaits.
Hey guys, on today's episode, we're going to talk about how you can be any kind of coach you want. Noelle, good morning.
Good morning, John.
I love it when you call me sister. It's very endearing.
That's how you know I truly love you.
There's no one on this planet that calls me that. And I don't think I would like it if anyone called me that. But for some reason, when Noelle calls me sister, it's like, oh yeah, I like it.
Yeah, it feels good, right?
It does.
You know, this is such a good segue into our topic because, like, all right, so you can be any kind of coach you want, right? What am I doing when I call you sister?
You're connecting with me.
I'm connecting with you.
You're connecting with me. You're being human. You're, having fun. You're not taking life so seriously. All of those things. But also, I feel like with you, it's if you just met me yesterday and you're like, "Hey, sister," that would be kind of annoying. But because we have history and we have an authentic relationship, there's some substance there.
Yeah, so I'm tapping into the energy that exists between us. I'm also gender fucking.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm disrupting normative standards for how we address each other, and I am taking on the masculine aspect of my identity and flipping it around to reverse our gender calling card.
Yes, and guys, we're not encouraging you to call your client sister, or you can. I guess it depends on your comfort relationship with your client. But all of these things that we just discussed, that's kind of running underneath, I think is important when you're establishing a relationship with your clients as well.
Yeah, and when you're choosing how you are going to show up in the world.
Right. I think so many coaches, especially when they're newer, are really afraid of their client and afraid of how they want to show up, and that they're gonna offend someone, or that they should mold themselves into a way where they'll be more liked.
It's true. And that's actually one of the competencies that we teach in the Catalyst Intensive is how to take ownership of your authentic presence, because there's two parts to coaching presence. It's not only being present and holding space, but it's also your authentic brand presentation in how you show up.
Yes, and this is one of the reasons why I struggled with, wearing the therapist hat is in the clinical world, there's a lot more shoulds, and you're not so encouraged to be your unique self.
You are not encouraged to be your unique self. Your unique self needs to disappear in therapy land.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So this is a nice bridge into you being any kind of coach you want. I think part of being any kind of coach you want starts with you showing up authentically you. I think that's kind of the beginning of it,
Know thyself, know thyself, know thyself. And, when we say you can be any kind of coach you want, it goes in 13 different directions.
Yeah.
It's your brand presence, how you choose to use language, how you choose to project your brand image. It's your niche, what topics you choose to coach on and around, and then also the techniques that you choose to use. You don't have to lead with any one of those three things. They can be married all together, and they're equally important.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you mentioned your techniques. I didn't even think about that. And the way that you work, your techniques, your toolbox, that is also, it's a huge part of, coaching in the way that you want to, being any kind of coach you want to be.
Absolutely. So let's just take you and I as little case studies right now. Mm-hmm. So your containers technique. So guys, John developed a coaching technique called containers, and it's awesome. It's great for individuals. It's great for groups. And that technique was something that you led with in different capacities. And now you've published books. I remember when you were working with Airbnb running experiences.
Hmm.
So the technique itself led as a coach.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I didn't even think about that. The way that you want to help people, and your unique way, your concepts, or taking a collection of concepts, like in our Catalyst Intensive, we teach you, we give you all the crayons, and then putting it through your filter and coming up with your own unique style. That can be very
Mhm.
valuable. And then as you go on that journey and you hone your craft and you keep pedaling your bike and experimenting and playing, that stuff also turns into content and curriculum. So not only with your clients, but if you're like me and you're very active on social media, it could turn into videos. It could turn into things that little memes and blog posts, podcast episodes, all that stuff.
Yeah, and I work completely differently.
Hmm.
For a long time, I was too scared to step into my shoes, to step into my voice. And so I led with positive psychology and evidence-based technique. And that was my identity as a coach. And then as I grew and became braver, um, what ended up happening was the things that I cared about in the world, how people experience their own minds, the
Mm.
colonization that they're subject to, the systems and structures of oppression. Those started to show up in my coaching. And that's when I finally said, you know what? I'm a feminist coach.
Right.
And
But
I coach using applied positive psychology.
yes, you also help people with eating disorders, and that's powerful because that ties in with your story.
It does. It does. And so I think, this whole process of becoming is at the forefront of everyone's mind when they start out on this path. But in reality, the process of becoming takes a good number of years
Yes,
to,
yes.
to sort through.
I'm,
It's
I'm,
not something that you can just say, oh, I'm going to do this right now.
you know what? I'm glad you brought that up. What a great point. I think a lot of coaches, especially early on, they stress out because they don't know what their niche is. They don't know how they want to show up. It's so overwhelming. And you don't have to have the answers. I really believe in this idea that life coaching is a journey. It's a lifestyle, and it's not over the weekend you're going to figure everything out, and suddenly on Monday you hang your shingle on your door and you're ready for business. You're always growing and changing and evolving, and then the way that you coach, matches that.
It's true. What I tell our students is where you end up is going to be a mixture of the techniques that you use, the things that are intellectually interesting to you, and then also your lived experience.
Yes, yes, and when Noel says your lived experience, the way that I put it, but I mean the same exact thing is it's going to line up with your story. So usually what happens is, if you've overcome something, or maybe you're passionate about a certain topic because like Noelle's story and her becoming a feminist coach, realizing those things are very important to her. Um, it could or like for me going through a divorce and suddenly being passionate about relationships, and then going from like a complete child to redefining what a man looks like, and still on that journey. So getting inspired by true life things that encourage me to talk about those topics. So working with kids in nonprofit. So when you're thinking about coaching and how you want to coach and what kind of coach you want to be, um, don't just think about what's out there and what people will like. Uh, Look at your story. What are you passionate about? What worked for you? What did you overcome? And I think that's what makes you as a life coach very potent.
And it can be something outside of you too. So one of our awesome instructors in the Catalyst Intensive, Lindsay Hawken, is a surfer,
Hmm.
and she coaches on branding for ocean conservation.
Right.
And, that's a cause that's outside of her. It's big, it's global. She just worked on the UN campaign. And if you trace it all the way back and say, okay, well, how does this relate to her story? Well, she's a surfer. She lives in the ocean. She grew up on an island. This is such a part of her body and her being that she took a look at the world and said, what would I be devastated about if it actually came to fruition? And it's the death of our ocean.
Yeah.
Um, and you can lean into causes like that to anchor yourself as a coach too.
It makes coaches three-dimensional.
It does.
you know? And then I think as you do that, you start to draw in people who resonate with you, who gravitate toward you,
Yeah.
and then those are the people that you're going to be able to, I believe, impact the most.
Exactly. And it can even be something that's totally not sexy at all. Say, I just had this conversation, I shit you not, with a client this morning, and we really got down to it and discovered that he loves process.
Hmm.
He loves it. He loves strategy. He loves process. He loves dumping the Legos out and helping somebody figure out the most efficient and effective way forward. It doesn't matter what the thing is, it's the process itself that lights him on fire. And he said, so what do I do with this? And I said, well, now you have to come back to me next week with all of the different jobs out there that rely on process
Yeah.
as a skill set. And then we'll take a look at it and see what comes up. But being able to coach on process is huge and vastly important and really vital to so many different organizations and humans and ways of being.
I love that you said it doesn't have to be sexy, because I think what's happening is because of the commercialization of wellness, people are gravitating toward the, I mean, I guess you could say sexy, but the popular words like, mindfulness, relationships, and those are great. And if you want to coach in those areas, that's great. But I'm seeing a lot. I'm not seeing a lot of coaches coming up with different topics and different ways of coaching that we haven't seen before. And I think that's really interesting to me.
It is interesting. And so much of it, I keep my finger on the pulse of kind of what's going on with the science. And there are areas in which we are emerging, like neuroplasticity.
Hmm.
I think the next 20 years are going to tell us incredible things about how our brains work. But really, what coaches do, especially if you're a certified coach, if you're an ethical coach, is you work using an informed practitioner model. And the informed practitioner model means that you've taken the time to learn about the research. And so the reason that we're seeing a lot of different things replicated in terms of how people coach is because it works.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's also interesting about Noelle and I is that Noelle is very science oriented, and so that's going to be threaded into her language, what she's interested in. Backing things up with facts, all of that. I am not. So it doesn't, we're just different. But, again, things that make you feel alive, things that you're passionate about, things that are honest to you.
And that's one of the great reasons about why it's important to surround yourself with all sorts of different kinds of people who can give you new ideas. I can walk into a team meeting and say a sentence and everybody just stares at me. And I'll say the same sentence to John and say, can you make it pretty? And he'll say the same thing in his words. And people are like, oh God, that's beautiful.
Well, I don't know about that.
At
Okay.
least it got through, but
Yeah.
at least the message got through.
Right. And it's funny, speaking of language, don't be afraid to coach in a way where you are, you're speaking your language in the way that you want to talk to someone, the way that you want to reframe something, the way that you want to champion someone's story. It doesn't have to be a textbook. I mean, I don't think it should be.
Humor is important,
Yeah.
flexibility is important, authenticity is important. And all of these different aspects go into deciding what your niche is. Your niche could be the fact that you use humor as a coach with your
Sure.
clients,
Sure.
that you laugh with your clients. How great is that?
What do you think? What do you think is going to happen with coaching as it evolves and the different types of coaches that are out there and that continue to grow?
I think, it's interesting. So I think it's going to mirror what's happened with therapy. So therapists are trained using different kinds of theoretical tenets and underpinnings. So you might be a systems therapist, you might be a
Hmm.
Freudian therapist, you might be a Jungian therapist, right? Clients, people who think of, oh, I need to go see a therapist, they're not thinking, Was this therapist trained, in the tenets of Freud? Was this
Right.
therapist trained in the tenets of systems thinking? Same deal with a coach. Coaches are going to be trained in more and more complex and intricate and interesting ways of enacting change. And clients won't really know the how and the why behind it all. They'll just know that it works. And so I think that coaching will continue to push into the public's consciousness as this thing works, and it will become very mainstream.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, rarely is there someone who says, I need to see a psychodynamic therapist. It's usually,
Right.
I have a friend, she's amazing, go check her out. And then it's, word of mouth referral, or you come across someone and there's something interesting about that therapist, that you connect to. And I think with life coaching, it's more, it's more of that. So with life coaching, there's going to be something about that coach that you're drawn to. Or, someone just refers you to that coach because that coach helps someone else, or that coach has a unique way of working. And then, yeah, you're right. I don't think it's going to be because the coach specializes in one certain topic.
Yeah. And, I was just thinking of myself. So I call myself a feminist coach. I'm really, intellectually interested in the colonized mind right now, but I'm doing a lot of divorce recovery.
Yeah.
It's just coming my way. I don't know if it's divorce season or what, but I'm getting a lot of it. And the reason that I get a lot of divorce for clients is because I've recovered clients is because I've done a lot of it. And so people simply want to work with somebody who's held somebody else's hand through the dark night a million times.
Well,
I know what I'm doing.
and also you've been through one yourself.
I have been.
Yeah. And I think what's great about coaching is, as a coach, you can front load, you can embrace that. As a therapist, a lot of times you're embarrassed too. Like as a therapist, you're kind of don't want to share your story. You're very neutral. But as a coach, it's powerful to know that a coach was struggled with an eating disorder or an addiction or went through a divorce or had his or her rebirth. That stuff makes coaches, I think, more valuable, not less.
It did. So to wrap it all up here today, when we're saying you can be any kind of coach you want, it goes in three directions. The topics that you coach on, how those topics are tied to your story, whether it's your intellectual interests or what happened to you in life, and then the science, the techniques,
Hmm.
the modalities that you use to move someone from point A to point B. And if you're not comfortable sharing your story, you can always lead with the science. If you're not comfortable leading on the science, you can always lead with your story. And if you just kind of want to be somewhere in the middle, that's okay too.
What's interesting is as you were just saying that, I was thinking you're science and I'm story. You lead,
Yeah,
not that you don't have a story, but you lead with science and that's what fuels you. I lead with story. And we're good examples of that. And it doesn't, and we're very different. And it's a good thing. Well, like the world needs different coaches.
the world's neat, and also a really great way to find somebody to partner with because you have different strengths,
Yes, for sure. There's only one.
different skills.
I think there's only one type of coach that you can't be, and that's just a life coach. you know,
Yeah,
that's too broad.
it is.
Yeah.
It's broad and it gets confusing for the consumer.
Well, thanks for the chat, Noelle. And guys, if you're interested in life coaching, come check us out at JRNI Coaching, and you can be any coach you want.
Yep. And if you want to talk about it, give me a call. I do take calls with our prospective students, and I love these conversations.
Yes. All right, guys, be well.
Have a great one.
Bye, sister.
Bye.